Hi there, and welcome on the journey to transform culture. I'm Steve, and I'll be your guide. Well, folks, I hope you're having a fantastic day and an even better week. It's January 2nd, right? And it's a Friday. So we're going to call this Freestyle Friday today, although the topic will probably be moving parts. Kind of want to give it a general name that way because I don't know the moving parts, folks. I don't know where this one's going to go. We'll just let it flow and see what happens, right? I'll try not to tread too much on topics of the past, but I mean everything is interlaced. And let me preface by saying, as I sometimes do in these videos, to remind you that a lot of times we jump into the organizational culture. Mostly it's because that's where we mostly congregate as groups and teams, right? But these topics, all the dots connect, folks. Everything is connected, right? And this could connect to, any civic organizations, your church groups, your anything you're involved with, really, family, friend groups, all of it, right? So take from it what you will to use productively, right? To build bridges, right? To mend fences, heal hurts, and all the rest of it, and to grow, right? The whole concept is to transform. And as I say at the end of every video, right? We can't transform anything on the outside if we're not willing to transform on the inside. And with the new year kicking off, I'm just letting it flow, folks. Let's see where it goes. With the new year kicking off, what we can talk a little bit about is kind of assess, we don't have to get into the every details of last year, but we can kind of make a list. It's like, hey, and this doesn't matter if it's organizationally, personally, and so on. But make a list. Hey, what did I learn in 2025, right? There may have been some hard lessons. There may have been some real difficult things that happened to you. I know I've had a few of my own. so I'm right there with you. It took an automotive dealer 5 months to fix my vehicle. Yeah, so that wasn't fun at all. And I'm sure there's plenty of you that have endured that pain in some form or fashion. Maybe not that long, but maybe longer for some, or repeatedly. But we can kind of look back at this last year and say, okay, what did I learn, right? Even from that example, I can say, what did I learn? Anytime we're trying to get something done, but we have to, our immediate thought might be to go to war. Oh my gosh, we got to really battle this situation. Or do I handle the situations delicately? Do I handle, a mix, right? I know in that situation, I kind of had to handle it in a mix because it was an out-of-state situation. So, but in general, right? And it wouldn't matter what we're talking about, whatever issue, you learn something from that, right? I learned a few things. Learned about where in the process to take in handling that type of an issue that I had never known before. Now that was a long lesson, but what did I do with the time, right? So there was the thing that occurred, right? And then what did I learn? But also, what did I learn with the time during that time, right? Because I had a little bit of a downtime there that I didn't really expect to have. And with that downtime, what did I do, right? So I wrote a few papers, did some research. But, obviously I did the book the year before, but expounded on some of the video topics, of this last 2025. So created a few more, episodes for folks to, so it's always should be about a service, right? Can't transform anything on the outside unless you're willing to transform on the inside. But are we able to transform on the inside if we don't give ourselves time and attention? And I'm often reminded of this. My kids are grown and I have grandkids, so I'm in a different phase of life. But I think about back when I was in my late 20s and 30s and so on, when my kids were growing up, and I remember thinking, yeah, I pretty much didn't have, except for sleep, I pretty much didn't have any of my own time. Now, I don't want to over exaggerate. I was a basketball guy, so I got in my intramurals and my activities and stuff like we often do. We have our hobbies and interests and so forth. So I'm not to say we didn't have any time. But back then, I didn't have the wisdom to understand that sometimes you just need to sit quietly in a room, right? You don't really get that when you've got a flurry of activity going on around you, fires to put out, things to take, kids to run here and there and hither and yon, all the things, right? you don't often have time for self-care. I didn't even know that. I didn't really regard the term of self-care until my late 40s. And by then, you think like, well, yeah, hopefully, right? So, and think about it, folks, just it can come off even self-centered for individuals to, say have self-care, to say, go on a hike by themselves, to go do something in solitude, right? Just you and your thoughts and all of it, right? In nature and so forth. It's a healing time. But sometimes we don't necessarily think of it as a healing time, but it kind of is, right? You think about going kayaking or canoeing down a pretty established creek or river, right? How peaceful that is, right? And you can be with others when you're doing this, right? You don't always have to be chattering and so forth. Going on a drive where there's not a lot of talking, you're just enjoying the scenery and seeing what's out there. Unless you're driving through the middle of town, then that's probably not really calming and relaxing. But you get the idea. There's times that we have to, we have to take time. We have to take time to kind of figure this out and find our sweet spot, right? I think that the world primarily caters to women in this regard. All the industries, right? Even yoga, not to say that a man can't go do yoga, but all of it is catered toward the feminine in society. There's very little that caters to the solitude of man, unless we're talking about going out fishing, right? Going fishing by themselves, or whatever, just having some quiet time or a hike, right? Aside from a couple of things like that, and that's not really a commercialized thing necessarily, right? A lot of times if it's commercialized, it's probably group activities and all this stuff, right? So society kind of skews some things, and you can kind of see how it plays out too. You see, say in organizations where some males, they were stressed out to the nines, and they're stressed out to the nines. And then how does that come across? And then who are they blowing up on at work, and how is that fragmenting? Not only working relationships, but who knows how that's affecting personal relationships, right? Not taking self-care time and not doing those sorts of things can definitely impact your relationships, right? Not, another element of this is getting rest, right? Use any time when you've got together socially and then, didn't sleep well that night because you didn't sleep long, say, because you were visiting folks up till late hours, having a good time visiting, da 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 da. And then you wake up early and you're like, whoa, I know that I'm behind myself. I'm not as fresh today when I woke up as I was yesterday when I woke up, right? So there's those scenarios where now you could take that micro and you can blow it up into the macro and go, okay, did I take care of myself in 2025? Was I really cognizant and aware of my physiology, right? I may have gotten, workouts in and that sort of thing, but was I sleeping well enough? Was I putting my phone down or my device down? Was I this? Was I that? And it doesn't mean to obsess over it and to like panic over it and over hyper obsess over it. But it is to look at it generally and say, what are some areas of self-care, right? And you can do an itemization there, do an inventory there and say, did I do any self-care in 2025, right? I can definitely say I had time in solitude. Maybe at some point I will post a little mini video, mostly just pictures type video, of this entire shop. When it started out, it looked like it had been bombed out and it was disgusting. I mean, I didn't want to walk in here. And now it's freshened up and it's not perfect. It's not, a modern shop. It's an old shop. But for an old shop, it's cleaned up pretty good and useful, right? And healthy. Like you can come out in here and not, fear for myself. There's nothing toxic in here now. So those are the kinds of things that you want to take a look at, is do an inventory and say, hey, in 2025, what did I have opportunity to do, and what advantage did I take advantage of those opportunities? Because we can look at the things where we learned a lesson from something negative, but we can also say from the positive too, right? What was the positive? I can flip that scenario with having some downtime in 2025 into the positive and say, wow, I got to work on my grandfather's old chest and his old workbench and sanded it down and stained it, restained it, and and did all the things, right? Freshened it up, made it useful. Now it's my desk, So and then this one behind me, and I left a lot of it rough because I kind of liked, the old rough, look of it and everything. So I didn't clean it up crazy, but I left the back wall as it was, but I did clean up the surface. If you go back to the beginning of the videos, you look back and you'll see where this is all roughed up. So I cleaned all that off and refinished it and everything. So little projects, right? Some of these pet projects that we do can be healthy. These are opportunities. It's like doing any task. And actually, a lot of times you think about 5S, right? If you're not familiar with 5S, you can go back, scroll through and find 5S videos that I've done. I won't get into that now, but 5S, you can go through and, kind of your spring cleaning, right? So you could go through and say, hey, it's January, but I'm going to spring clean because I didn't really spring clean in 2025. Maybe I should do it now. This would be a good time. Things are quiet, especially if you're in an organization and maybe there's a little quiet on orders and workflow and that sort of thing. Hey, what can me and the team get involved with, right? Do a Kaizen event, whatever. Call Steve up and see if we can have him come out and help us with an event or two, or do, guide and escort the process to some improvement, right? Some sustainable improvement, not the typically canned and leave you hanging improvements that you find with many. So, but you can do that assessment. You can kind of see what advantage did you take of some of those downtimes, or some of the time where things were broke down. Hey, XYZ was broke down, so in lieu of that, we did this, right? Keep track of these things, because those, especially if they helped you, right? If they didn't help you, you want to note that, because, hey, this didn't help us, right? Because you want to use this going into 2026, now that we are here, you want to use this in 2026 as a launching, right? You want to use this as a launching forward into the next thing, right? What else? How better can we serve our customers now? And remember, those customers aren't just your end users of product, for example. This could be your community, people in your community, in your circle, right? The local nursing care, the local hospitals, anything that you serve in outside of your organization, your family and friend groups, right? Opportunities to serve. How can we improve upon that, right? And it might be subtle. It doesn't mean you have to go out and do something ridiculous. Just do something. Find something to contribute, right? Because, folks, remember, there's a fork in the road every second. Actually more than that, but we'll just use a second as a small increment of time. Every second, there's a fork in the road, right? There's a fork in the road as I'm, talking to you right now. I could go off in this direction, right? I can talk about, I could go way off in the weeds and talk about how I learned how to unicycle when I was 12, in between, I think it was 5th and 6th grade, and how I just fell down, right? I took that downtime in the summer, right? I wasn't planning to talk about this, by the way, and I just fell on my face, from car to car and tree to tree, until finally I figured out how to do it. What did you do with your downtime? Assess what you did. Hey, I had this spot in time. I wanted to figure this out. I learned this, right? I didn't know this before. I learned this. You may be, now this will go down and this will go into the more on the, interaction with other humans on planet Earth scenario here, but you may have tried to get assistance and help from people that friends or family, right, who knew that you needed assistance in a particular area or not, and they didn't help you. So sometimes what we learn is that some people are competitive against you that you don't even know you're just living your life. But what you didn't realize is they've been competitive with you, and we're going to do anything they could not to be of service to others, especially yourself. What did you learn about that? Well, you learned about you can't invest in people who aren't willing to invest in you, right? You would agree with this in an organization. Now take that outside the organization. Are you going to invest in a church that also doesn't invest in your well-being? No. Are you going to do that in any civic organization? No. Are you going to do that with any friends or family group? You shouldn't, but we see this time and time again, right? We see people setting themselves up, serving friends and family and others in the community, only to be let down later on to realize, oh my gosh, I'm the giver in a situation and all these folks are taking, right? I'm the sucker, right? Don't feel bad. I've been the sucker for a good portion of my career and life. But there's things to be learned. And one of those things is not to be bitter. You heard the old thing, don't be bitter, be better. Yeah, don't be bitter, be better. Understand, hey, they did that because they were insecure, they're fearful, all the things, right? They're toting baggage, all the isms that they're dealing with in life that they haven't figured their way out of. And you may be one of them, and that's okay. You may be on your journey at any stage in that journey. But at a certain point, anybody on that journey is going to realize it's kind of like somebody who, we'll say, drinks way too often. At a certain point, you're not going to be going out as often with your friends to the local club or whatnot. And guess what? They're going to go, oh, and then they're going to create a chasm, and then there you go. You will start to see people fall away. Why is that? You're taking a different trajectory. You're taking a more balanced approach in your life. Doesn't mean you don't love your friends and family. It just means that, hey, you just don't align as you once did. Guess what, folks? That's another signal of transformation. You wouldn't even probably know you're transforming until these things occurred. Heck, it could be your family, right? It could be, sad to say, it could be your children, right? It could be your children. Right? It could be anybody that's basically going, and especially if it's a situation where you're the giver and others are the taker. Now, I know I'm speaking to a segment here because I've seen them in bucketfuls in my lifetime. Parents who are so overgiving during their kids' growth and development that when the kids become adults, they have projected onto, for some ridiculous reason, an expectation that these kids somehow owe their life to these parents. No. Respect, sure, but their life, no. They don't. And if you're investing in those relationships in that way with an expectation for that, you're not the giver. You're somebody who is trying to be you're basically setting yourself up to be the taker later in life. And that is going to rudely awaken you. And I know there's probably plenty out there who have realized this if you've done this. And sadly, all parents kind of do this in a way, not even trying. It's just, a thing. There's some people who've fallen into it, bought into this whole notion, who would probably not even classify it, right? It would be an ism that never would be admitted to in public, okay? But in subtle ways, parents are giving anyway to their children. Most parents, I don't know, there's probably exceptions, right? But most parents are loving, kind, and giving to their parents and grandchildren, or their children and grandchildren, right? And with no expectations, right? It's just like, hey, I love you, I want to do the thing, this, that, and the other thing. But then what happens is over time, maybe some of those kids, and I've seen, adults as their children became adults and so on, but those children wouldn't lift a finger to help them, wouldn't lift a finger to, anything. I took care of both my parents as they, right before they passed, within a couple of years of passing both of them. And I don't regret that time at all, right? I got to spend that time with them. During that time, it was very difficult if you've ever been a caregiver in one capacity or another. One, say one more entrenched and another maybe a little more hands-off. But in any respect, you don't do that. You're not doing that with an expectation. These folks are about to move on to the next, journey, right? And you love them. So you do that thing. You don't even think twice about that, right? That's the way a parent is also, I would say, and this is just my opinion. So, my 2 cents right here is, I think a good, kid, tries to help their parents out a little bit when it comes to those matters, right? When they're definitely, struggling, going through that, literal change from life to the hereafter, for sure. But I also think, too, that parents also don't hold themselves back to love their kids and their grandkids, right? And you do with what you can, and everybody has the ability. Sometimes it's not giving them things. It's just time and attention. right? Potentially, right? But I also think too, as we're coming up, we start to then take on those more responsible roles. We start to take on, the framework of the parent, and now with older parents, right? So there is definitely a transition and a transformation that happens there as we grow and as we become more mature. You see people also too, and it doesn't look, folks. You don't have to look far. There are people who are emotionally stunted. They haven't dealt with things that they grew up with. They're still holding all kinds of animosity, say for their parents or siblings, and all the family stuff, all the friend stuff, whatever. They're holding all this stuff, uh, all this animosity or competitiveness or whatever, unhealthy stuff, right, against other people in their life, and stuff from old, right? It isn't to say you don't acknowledge the trauma that you experienced and say, hey, what did I learn from that? And how can I be better from that, right? Be better, not bitter, right? But it isn't to say, oh, well, wait till I'm successful, or wait till I'm in a da 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 da, and I'll show them, and I'll. If you have that perspective, then I guess what you can say about that is you're never going to be rid of that stone. That stone is going to sit in your gut for the rest of your life unless you learn to let it go. So part of taking stock of 2025 isn't just to acknowledge the things that occurred and what did I learn and all that. How do I want to be better in 2026? But I need to also let go of those things, right? I need to let go of those the the frustration or anger. When my vehicle situation was in there was a few moments in there when I was not happy, right? And I wasn't like hyper angry or anything like that, but I was definitely frustrated, right? At how the customer, it's probably because I'm so customer centric in my experience that I've experienced all these things, and now I'm literally being treated like, someone shouldn't. I was basically treated like the way you shouldn't treat a customer, right? And I'm thinking, do they know I talk about this stuff? Right? Probably not, right? But do they know I have this experience? Do they know all those things, the quality and the management and all these things, right? Do they know that? No, of course they don't know it. They don't care, and that's part of this whole scenario. It's about caring, folks. We can't set caring off to the side. Doesn't matter if it's our family relationships, our personal relationships, it, cultural, right, civic, and all the rest of it. If we should be caring. If we don't care, folks, we can't. Nothing will transform. And if we're people that says, well, I don't care about transformation, well, then you're going to essentially become a catcher's mitt for all these things happening to you, and then you're going to become angry at everything because you're not recognizing the lesson within it all. And because you're not recognizing the lesson within it all, then there's no way you can come up with a kind of a game plan for, say, next year or tomorrow or a week or a month from now that puts you in a better place in life, right? It doesn't necessarily mean monetarily or materially. It might just be relationally, right? Don't you want to have better relationships? Don't you want to have, everything should be just a little better as you go, right? Or better than that, right? But you can't get there without that expectation, and you can't have that expectation if you don't do the inventory to then make the plan, right? And it's no different in our personal lives as it is in our organization. So it's super important that we do these things. So, well, there you go. Freestyle Friday. A lot of moving parts, right? But there's hope. Hope in every day, every time we wake up. So don't lose that hope. Always keep that spark alive. Always remember, hey, something is going to happen today that is just going to be amazing, that I had never expected it would happen, right? And that it's going to probably be transformational or an opportunity to help transform others' lives too, right? Not just receiving, but also what can I do to transform others' lives? That's fun, that you can kind of, sit down and say 2026, right? What do I want to do, right? That is a blank canvas for you to fill up with some really amazing transformative things. All right, folks. All right, so that's it for Freestyle Friday, moving parts, right? Lots of them. And on that note, remember to hit that good green domino 3 to 5 times a day or more to uplift, motivate, inspire, and just encourage one another. We do this not only helping to transform culture, but we're transforming our own lives. But remember, we can't transform anything on the outside if we're not willing to transform on the inside. That's super important. All right, folks, take care. Have a wonderful day. Hit like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, we'll talk to you later.